All right. So the other thing about getting started early, even as people are arriving, is I'm sure more people are going to want to hear the last couple minutes of what you have to say than for us to wait so that everybody can hear introductions. So let's get started. First, thank you everybody for coming to the session. What we're going to be talking about for the next hour and 15 minutes are community-based approaches to things that are often considered the work of lawyers. So this is, as an attorney who considers himself a movement lawyer, I am constantly fretting about my community-based partners violating unauthorized practice of law statutes. And on my someday list is repealing unauthorized practice of law statutes. And the reason why I would want to do that is the groups that are here, part of this session. So we have Silicon Valley Debug, who's developed an idea of participatory defense that is really going nationwide and is looked at across the country as really being the best developed of these sorts of ideas, particularly in criminal court, where involving the community is particularly difficult. We also have Chicanos Unidos, who, when I say I'm a movement lawyer, what that often means is I partner with them in impact litigation. And Chicanos Unidos has been running legal clinics, and in their work with me have been plaintiffs in lawsuits. And so we're going to hear from them also. But by way of formal introduction, we'll hear first from Silicon Valley Debug. Debug is an organization that supports directly impacted youth and families navigate the criminal justice and immigration systems through community organizing. Debug and the families in San Jose are the founders of the organizing model called Participatory Defense. Debug started out as a media organization in 2000, producing its own magazine, and then grew to be involved in many issues relevant to our communities. From Debug, we have Zach and Andrew. Zach Kirk is an organizer for Silicon Valley Debug and San Mateo Participatory Defense, born and raised in Palo Alto, California. As a second-generation Polynesian, he gained his interest in the work through people in his family being targeted by the criminal justice and immigration systems from increasing paranoia about gangs. Zach works on participatory defense in San Mateo County and is especially passionate about ending gang enhancements in California. Our other presenter from Debug is Andrew. Andrew Bigelow is an organizer of Silicon Valley Debug. Born and raised in East Side San Jose, he originally entered Debug as a youth where he began to learn media and video making, before getting involved in organizing. He's a participatory defense organizer and supports families navigating the criminal justice system, as well as working on videos and media. And with that, I will let Andrew and Zach take the next half hour or so. Thank you.
Right on. Yeah, we really appreciate the time and the space, and we appreciate everyone joining this group, and really honored to share space with Chicanos Unidos too, and yeah, excited to get into it. So we're gonna screen share. We got a little prezi that we'll share, but I'm sure we'll probably be more talking more than visuals. But let's do this right now. You got anything to start off with, Zach, before we jump in?
No, I would just say, yeah, I think Sean gave like a really good like kind of broad summary of what participatory defense is, but like in one word, it's, it comes from the bottom, the individual case, and we get, a host of best practices, from each individual case we work on. So it's all about kind of creativity and thinking. So, the best participatory defense strategies we haven't figured out yet, and they're in the future, and we have to think about them and come together. And that's why, having 30 people on a Zoom is so helpful, that we can, have the marketplace ideas that Sean was talking about. But yeah, thanks, Andrew.
Right on. Okay. Can everyone see that? Everyone see the screen? Okay, cool. So we could dive into it. Definitely want to give full notice that we could spend hours, maybe even days, doing deep dives into this work and into the intricacies of it, and kind of what makes it up, and all the things that are a part of it. But I think today we're gonna give that overview, and I think specifically around the conversation of how to fight the criminalization of neighborhoods, and how to as community and families, how do folks fight gang enhancements and gang charges and stuff like that too. So that's definitely kind of be where the focus is today for our 30 minutes. But yeah, let me see here if I can control this. Okay. So I'm gonna give we'll start off, just give a little bit of background about Debug in participatory defense. So I always like to start off by saying that Debug didn't just wake up one day and was like, oh, I want to I want to go to the courts and help people out with cases. Debug didn't start with that intention. And it was really, Debug got involved in this work actually because folks who were just coming to Debug were oftentimes getting harassed by police. And this is before my time, you know what I'm saying? I walked into Debug, I think 2010, been around for a long time before me. But folks were getting harassed by police, folks were getting beat up by police, etc., targeted. And folks would come to Debug and they had active cases, right? So what happens when someone survives an encounter with the police, they end up having some sort of case afterwards, right? And so really it was folks at Debug and moms and aunties and cousins and folks who were coming to Debug just trying to figure out what to do next, and so that's kind of really how this started. And you see this red table in this picture. That red table is still a Debug. It's been there for a long time. But this is where the meeting started and where families came together. And before it was ever called participatory defense, it used to be called Sunday meetings because they used to happen on Sundays at 2:30. And that was before it was ever called. There was a name given to the model. But really, like I said, it's families who were walking in who had loved ones who were going through criminal or immigration cases, and we'd sit around this table and we'd go through this what may sound like overly simplistic process of listing updates and then next steps, and folks would just come back every Sunday until their loved one was free. And everyone around the table would share with each other what experiences they had going through the system and what they could offer up, or what folks should try, or what they should ask their attorney, all these types of things. And all that to say too, I appreciate Sean's intro too, because full disclosure, when participatory defense started and families started doing this, there was a very adversarial relationship with the public defenders in Santa Clara County, and it wasn't folks were and it's kind of this typical conversation that would always happen between community and public defenders, community being public defenders, why aren't you doing something, and public defenders being you guys aren't attorneys, right? And so but really it was only through the persistence of these families and these moms, some of the folks that you even see in this picture, that really helped grow that relationship to where there really is today. There's a really healthy working relationship and partnership between at least us here locally in San Jose and the public defenders. And so all that to say, so describing what participatory defense is, it's developed by families in San Jose, California. Participatory defense is a community organizing model for people facing charges, their families, and communities to impact the outcome of cases and transform the landscape of power in the courtroom. I got to say, every meeting that we have, every participatory defense meeting, when new families come, we kind of give the what you call it, the spiel, the rundown of what this meeting is and what space they just walked into. Some of the first things that we say, right, is that, this is not, we're not lawyers. We don't pretend to be lawyers. We don't want to be lawyers. We are, this is where our place is, and this is working with families. And we don't even see it as a service. It's a big part of, we don't see it as a service. We see it as community organizing, and we see it as the families who really lead this process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So before I take up too much time on this slide, I just want to give a brief explanation of this picture. So this is imagine this is our whiteboard, and if you could see through our whiteboard into Debug during an ACJP meeting or a participatory defense meeting. The person taking notes on the board, that's Gail. That's like, she's one of the founding mothers of participatory defense, and she originally came in here fighting for her son, which is actually a different son in the juvenile case. But here in this picture, her son across the way, Lamar, who's in the Unidxs shirt. Lamar was pulled over and had guns pulled on him by Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department for a supposedly broken taillight, and was drug out the car and was arrested and then later released. And so he was, Gail and Lamar would come to ACJP participatory defense meetings, and we're trying to figure out how to fight his case, and how to get him justice and how to hold the system accountable. Blanca here on the bottom left-hand side is another founding mother of participatory defense, and really one of the originators of this model and stuff. And she was advocating for her sons who were going through the criminal justice system, including her son that's on the top of the table, Rudy. Rudy was arrested and interrogated as a youth. Rudy's also developmentally delayed, and so the police in the interrogation got a false confession from him because they took advantage of him. And so that was something that was one of the cases that Blanca was there for and was fighting for her son. And then Ceci, if you see on the top left, she's still a community organizer at Debug, and she originally came in advocating for her dad, who was picked up by ICE and immigration outside of a Home Depot, and so she was advocating for her dad through that process as well. So reason why it's super important for us to say this is because for us, we think it's really important that folks see and hear the stories of who, how this got started, and some of the folks that really built this into what it is today. So yeah, so I'll we can move on to the next one. I think I just took all 30 minutes with that, but that's okay.
No, you're good, Andrew. And yeah, while we're on the subject of families that are our founders, if folks see in the chat, Nora she works with us at San Mateo, and she's one of the leaders in trying to end ICE transfers, which is all based on her work in participatory defense. Hey Nora, but yeah, and so she's one of the families that really embodies this idea of family organizer. It's not up to me and Andrew to do things. It's Nora speaking in meetings. It's Nora speaking at rallies, and that's how the model goes. And so yeah, if we look at the principles, it's based on these three principles, which kind of flow through the work, which is that family and community strength can play a pivotal role in stopping and reducing incarceration for a loved one in community. Moving from there, families and communities can be even more powerful when taking the role of organizer and agent of change rather than the service recipient. So that, yeah, Andrew was talking about that spiel that we do at the beginning of every meeting. We try to, just say, this isn't a service. We'll get on a meeting and do it together and brainstorm this. But it's all about kind of creating community with the larger group, but then relationships with people to try to organize. And then kind of finally the ground up model that we do, which is by working on these individual cases, we begin to see some of the larger trends. For example, in San Mateo County, they've transferred over 200 people from our jail to ICE detention. And if you see Nora's background right now, that's her family who she continues to fight for. So we have families all the way from 20 years ago till now, and some of them pop back up and introduce us to other people, and it's we have this kind of word of mouth network now that's kind of that's kind of come up just through family connection.
Yeah. Right on. And just to echo off that and to give you some more context, like how these principles came to be. So like when Debug, this is probably about 2014, 2015, when we Debug actually started to share the model with other organizations that were similar to Debug around the country. And in the very early stages of that, there was only a handful of cities that were doing it. And we had like a gathering to be able to talk through kind of what happened and what's coming out of this work and what do folks think. And that's kind of where these principles were created from, was from that initial gathering and from right before the expansion of what participatory defense is today. And these are, the idea is to, is that like you could walk into any participatory defense meeting around the country, and these are the three principles that are always going to be upheld, right? And they're going to be really valued in terms of how the work happens and what guides the work. Right on. Okay, so we won't get too in depth into this, but at least in the spirit of talking about like how this model works in terms of supporting families through like gang enhancements or gang charges and stuff. We kind of see that the work is kind of in two lanes at the same time. And so one we would call like defense prep, right? And then the other one is social biography, or like kind of what I think is called is like mitigation. And so these are kind of like two things that happen at the same time, right? And both are equally important depending on where a family is and where a loved one is in a case, and what they're facing, and like we always say, every situation is different. Like there is no copy paste type of like strategy or playbook. You know what I'm saying? There's definitely lots of tools and lots of things that folks can do, but every situation is unique and has to be approached that way, right? But we always think it's important to help families think of it in this way, because essentially defense prep, like that's like actually trying to challenge the charges, right? We're not trying to get like mitigate like a sentence or something like that. It's to actually challenge the charges, and in a lot of these circumstances, that that could be getting experts, like offering up our own experts from the community to try and get rid of a gang charge, or reviewing discovery with the family, and the family looking through it, and some of the ways that we at least for myself, like kind of what we always talk about is that like oftentimes the folks who are going to have the most insight about like a neighborhood or about who someone is, or whatever, that it's going to be someone's family, and so really like tapping into the family, creating that way for the family to be able to access that, and look at the discovery and be like, like I know at that corner store that there's a camera on the corner or something like that, or like whatever that may be. To kind of help the defense prep, and really essentially all that kind of leads up to is the family having these conversations with the attorney to be like, hey, these are things that we think are important, that you should look into, or that you should investigate, or whatever it may be, in order to try and help drop charges or reduce charges, or if maybe eventually fight a case in a trial. Then the other side of that, right, is like social biography stuff, and this is what we really we make these things called social biography packets, and then also social biography videos, which are extensions of packets, but essentially those packets are like letters and pictures and any type of documents that kind of help humanize someone through this process, and we see those as being able to be used at any point in the process, whether someone's trying to get bail in like their first couple court dates, or whether someone's going up for sentencing. That the social bio packet can be used at both of those, anywhere in between, and even after someone's sentenced, like in post conviction, and trying to get post-conviction relief. Those packets can also be helpful. But these are kind of like, just want to kind of frame this. So these are kind of two different ways we that as organizers and families that we approach in order to be able to get the best outcome out of a case, and to be able to support somebody. Yeah, you got anything on this before we jump?
Not really. I think but just as we jump slides, I think Andrew mentions like a lot of the stuff. He already just mentioned it, right? But these are like what we've done so far. These are kind of like tried and tested. This is what we've done for PD to impact gang charges and gang enhancement. So I'll go through them. Andrew mentioned kind of creating our own experts. So that's like knowing mentors in the community. We've used like a youth mentor in San Mateo County. and even had as community experts, and it really gets the police experts and gang experts riled up. Just thinking that so much so that gang expert, when who was the police expert, saw him in the courtroom, he claimed that he was the community expert was a gang member as well. So it feels good because it feels, oh, we're getting them on the back of their heels. They're not expecting this. So community experts, and if folks were on yesterday and saw Jose's presentation about the Welga bird, that's another way that we can get community knowledge, package it together, and then give it to the attorney, and they can write that into the motion. Social bio packets and videos. Yeah, the one thing that's kind of the expansion is the video, where we feel like we can give like a real representation of what this community looks like. We can show that the gang task force coming through where they do every day on the street that they come through. We can talk about, and we can really show the context of communities in ways that sometimes letters and packets and stuff it will never really live up to that, and we'll show kind of where these people grew up in the context of their lives. The other one is reading through discovery, which is something that's if any lawyers are on the call, it's a learned practice, and it's definitely pretty hard. And looking at gang packets and stuff like that, making sure that we look through the 150 pages, 200 pages, as long as it takes with the families, and highlight it, and then we'll bring those concerns back to the attorneys. RJA, Racial Justice Act, and this is where we're getting, I think, most of our traction right now. If folks don't know, I can give a really bare bones explanation, but there's kind of two ideas of the Racial Justice Act. Is things going on in court that are we can kind of perceive like that are qualitatively racist, like calling the defendant an animal. That's we can understand that as being coded, and so motions can be filed to if there's a sentence, and if that was said during closing statements, then either getting a new trial or different things like that. The other side of the RJA, which is the black box right now, is the data portion. And so we've been doing some stuff in San Mateo County. We found like the number of people who have active convictions, and we're doing like our own data points, since the DA's office in CDCR won't give us any race data, because they know that's how we connect the loop and prove in court with the RJA motions that they're racist. And then the final one is just that moral support in court, packing it up. And as we get out of COVID, we want to get out of these Zoom courtrooms and into these real courtrooms, because that's when the judges, really feel the power of the community. It's not when that individual is there by himself. That's what Nora's saying. Packing the court, very effective. We want people to know that as they're getting, sentenced, we want that judge to know that they're sentencing the whole room to, and that they realize that there are consequences to this, just besides that 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, as we transition to all this, it kind of in that same spirit of like we view the families as like an extension of the defense team, and really the communication of between the attorney and the families, and making sure those nuances are and what's important are communicated, and really working as a team to decide what to really help the process and get the best outcome. And like I said, we can't express to, like, at least for myself, I've been a part of a lot of packets and videos to try and challenge gang allegations and gang enhancements, and really the process of humanizing someone's story and providing context to someone's story. A judge, a DA, as much as they may try not to, they can't unsee it, and they can't act like it doesn't exist, and it absolutely changes the dynamics of the courts. The more the families and community get involved. So we got a little example. Zach's going to go through an example, but we wanted to show folks this first. So the way we look at it is like, so this is the felony court procedure and what we call points of intervention. So like the gray boxes are like these kind of milestone court dates for every case going through a criminal case. The way we kind of articulate it is like those gray boxes, like that's where the attorneys represent their client, the loved one, and representing the family and the community, and are advocating for justice and for freedom. Where like what the community does and like what the family does, they the work that we do with the families, it happens in between these court dates. You know what I'm saying? So like, so the way we talk about it is like, it's the work in between that really counts. And so, you know, between the arrest, just like as an example, like between the arrest and arraignment, you know, being able to get a letter from an employer, verification of housing, could be the difference between someone spending a few weeks in jail and getting out 2 to 3 days later at arraignment. And so, and there's examples of that throughout the process, and all these very important things that folks can do and families can do to help their loved one. But yeah, so just to kind of frame like where this work is happening, right? Like where the meetings, the participatory defense meetings are happening, and where those that work with the families happening.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, and as we get into the specific, you know, I'm lucky to be able to talk about Leo is someone we're dealing with, and his sister Mimi, who is, you know, one of the hardest pushers for AB 333, which is trying to like seriously reform gang enhancement laws in California. And so I kind of, you know, I only have a couple minutes, but to kind of how do we zoom out, and how do we take, you know, this example of Leo's case? So I drew out a couple of things that I think are really important that we saw. We saw Leo's sister at arraignment, and we saw her there and have been with her ever since. You know, it's still an open case, but I kind of got like 4 different things that I think are, you know, factors in the case. The criminalization of neighborhood, which is, you know, the reason that we're all kind of collected here. The criminalization of social networks. The criminalization of culture and cultural symbols, and then just the plain old racism that we see. You know, the first one being, you know, like tattoos of neighborhoods and stuff like that being used as gang evidence, or cultural symbols like the Welga bird being used as gang evidence. And so we see these things, you know, as ridiculous on their face, and like racially coded based on how they select for culture. Down in San Jose, there was a really, really famous image that went viral on Twitter of the San Jose police chief putting a gun, a rosary, Andrew can a Welga bird mask, or a UFW mask, and a bunch of just other like Latino cultural symbols with a gun, and then posting on their Twitter as like, we're catching the criminals. And luckily it's San Jose, and Debug was involved, so there was pushback, you know, and he looks ridiculous for that. But we realize that, you know, there is in the minds of a lot of law enforcement and judges, a 1-to-1 relationship between the cultural symbols that we hold dear and what they see as criminal symbols. So a lot of what we're trying to do is get our community experts so we can re-explain and completely change this narrative. With the criminalization of social networks, we'll see that people are mentioned as not as brothers, not introduced as brothers or cousins, but only, you know, mentioned as affiliates. And the DA will purposely not mention their family relation so that they can overemphasize whatever kind of group relation that they're trying to make up. With the criminalization of cultural symbols, I think, yeah, the Welga bird is a very, very good example of something that is, you know, a symbol of upwards, of struggle, and that is being used and being taken as gang evidence. And then also, I think an interesting thing that we need to think of as like these these symbols, these cultural symbols are being criminalized selectively. Remember, it's selective. The cultural symbols of like of like rap and stuff like that. But if we look at, you know, mob films and stuff like that, these are considered the highest form of art. Godfather, Goodfellas. These are all, and they're more violent than anything than you can see, and they're all visual too. But we don't think Robert De Niro is a criminal. We don't think that that's probable cause to surveil him based on how well he acts like a mobster. But in this racialized way, with kind of people of color who have these kind of this culture, it's so off from the main that they can just act like, you know, it's a 1-to-1 connection between gangs and the Welga bird. It's a 1-to-1 connection between this rap group and this gang. And then finally, just is the plain old racism. There are multiple times like where we see someone wearing red and they're Latino, and that's a check, and that's, you know, 10 pages of the transcript and considered gang evidence. And so, you know, by the end of this, there's an individual who is maybe 15 years old, you know, who burglarized a home with his friend. And if the prosecution has done a good job, and they often do, since they have these things copy paste, is that they've portrayed him as like the 15-year-old next John Gotti, you know, and that he has to go for life, and that all of this information about rosaries, about Welga birds, it all constitutes the same stuff, you know, as like this, as like a mafia knowledge, as like the what we know as the mob, and we can make them the same as groups, and then suddenly this 15-year-old kid is the same as, you know, a 35-year-old mob boss, and that's and that's where we can see like the real racism of these gang things. But and this is what we talk about when going from small to big. But these are just some of the trends that we saw, you know, and we continue to see in Leo's case. But yeah, thanks for indulging me there, y'all.
Appreciate it, man. You know, and just to echo that too, you know, it's like, it's really, you know, like we kind of like how Zach was saying, you know, like we understand these things as being racist, like we understand these things as being racially motivated, and discriminatory, right? And then, so I think for, at least for myself as an organizer, right, how do I help, you know, the mom or the auntie be able to explain or give context to the attorney as to what these things actually mean in their lives, you know? Yeah, so like, again, just bringing it back to like incorporating the family, and like the family is going to be that voice to uplift that truth that these things are not what they're saying they are, you know? We got one more, and then we got one more, and then we're gonna stop here. So cases and campaigns is one of the principles that we have in terms of it's one of the principles we have in terms of like, through participatory defense, we see all these nuances and all these things that happen in the courtrooms, and through the process that we see that there needs to be a systemic change in those things, right? And so and it's through those individual cases. There's like small examples, like for instance, in Santa Clara County, there used to not be public defenders at misdemeanor arraignment. And then, you know, folks would just get railroaded, right? But like, doesn't necessarily like a, you know, if you say that out in the public and shit, people are gonna be like, sorry, people are gonna be like, wait, what do you mean? Like, what does that have to do with anything, right? But that's a big deal because folks are getting railroaded in arraignment court through misdemeanors, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, through this work is kind of how we see these holes, and how these holes get exposed. And then one of those things is plugging families into, and not even plugging families into, really families leading the efforts in order to change some of these things systemically. And so in the context of criminalization of neighborhoods and stuff like that, some of the stuff that families at Debug at least have been really involved in are things like RJ, the Racial Justice Act, AB 333. And then also, which are, both of those are current, and you know, definitely anyone who's on the call, I'm sure folks are probably already up on game about it, but if they're not, definitely please get involved, call your legislators and all that good stuff. And then the one in the past is like Prop 57 and ending direct files for youth transfers, you know, which are often times very much related to DA's accusation of children being advanced gang members, right? All those youth that get those kind of accusations are often tried to be charged as adults and transferred to adult court. But yeah, so just to kind of give some examples, like so like for instance, in the Racial Justice Act, you know, a family who was coming to Debug for their loved one. Their loved one's name was Hugo, and Hugo was being convicted or being charged as you know, this like top tier gang member, but it was solely off of informant testimony, and there was no other actual evidence outside of informant testimony. And you know, kind of in the spirit of almost what Zach was saying, you know, Hugo was a recording engineer. You know, he recorded, he ran a studio, he mixed and mastered, he produced music. You know, myself, I make music too. So like, I definitely, you work with everybody, you know what I'm saying? That you work with a lot of different people in that space. And But because of his relationship and him working with certain artists who were also profiled and a part of this indictment and charges were given, Hugo was charged, and he spent, I can't even remember how many years he spent pre-trial. It must have been like some ridiculous amount, like I want to say like 6 to 8 years or something like that pre-trial. And then he actually had a mistrial, and then the DA filed again for a retrial, and then he ended up losing at his second trial. But it's such a, Hugo's brother is the one who gave testimony at the Racial Justice Act hearing this year as to why the Racial Justice Act should be, what's the word when it goes back?
Retroactive.
Retroactive. Thank you. is the why Racial Justice Act should be retroactive and should apply to folks like Hugo, who the gang expert in his case gave all those kind of tropes, that encoded language and all that type of stuff that Zach just explained. That was all throughout Hugo's trial and Hugo's case. And they put a gang expert up on the stand for like 4 days, just talking about what red means and what the Huelga bird means, and all these associations and connecting the dots, all this type of stuff. And we were in court, we watched it and we listened to it and we see these folks testify. And so we understand that this is racist, and how do we create a some sort of systemic change to where this is no longer just allowed in this space. So I know we're running up on time. So yeah, I think that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's it. This is just like these are all the hubs around the country now, and folks who do this work and have these meetings. Some are organizations, some are just like groups of families, and they get together and do this and support others, and it looks in all these different types of ways. And then and then in the spirit of, is that it? Oh yeah, it's it right there. Okay.
All right. Thank you. I would love to take questions now, but I have learned that we need to save them for the end. Otherwise, whoever has the last presentation ends up really getting shorted. So we're going to move now to Chicanos Unidos. We'll have questions afterwards. And if it will be after 2:15, we can always move it to Kumo space. So thank you, Zach and Andrew. That was what I was hoping to hear. It was great. But moving on to Chicanos Unidos. Let me start by introducing who the organization is. We'll hear more from Daisy and Julie about that, but I also like to tell you a little bit about Daisy and Julie as individuals before we start to hear from them. So Chicanos Unidos is a grassroots organization based in Santa Ana in California, Orange County, California, that promotes cultural and political empowerment by addressing different social justice issues. For years, we've been in the forefront of fighting gang injunctions and the criminalization of communities of color. Daisy Bautista graduated from UC Irvine, also my law school alma mater, and is currently a law student pursuing her JD. In 2016, Daisy participated in Chicanos Unidos, the Orange County summer internship, and conducted research under the guidance of Gabby Hernandez Castillo, who I think is in the audience right now, on gentrification links and gang injunctions. Since 2018, Daisy has volunteered at the Chicanos Unidos, the Orange County Pro Se Legal Clinic, Orange County Legal Clinic. What's that? It's called the Orange County Legal Clinic, and it is a pro se legal clinic. As a volunteer, she supports gang injunction removal letters, sealing of juvenile records, applications, expungement applications, and makes linkages to community resources. Julie graduated from UC Irvine with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and a minor in Gender and Sexuality Studies and Civic and Community Engagement, and earned a Master's of Arts in Education with an emphasis on Social and Cultural Analysis from Cal State Long Beach. They've been part of She has been part, or they have been part of Chicanos Unidos since 2017, having worked on addressing rampant gentrification, supporting a school board campaign, and now supporting the community through Chicanos Unidos Legal Clinic. And I will give it to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean, and great to hear Zach and Andrew about participatory defense. I learned a lot, and I thought I knew a bit of Brady, but thank you for sharing more. And just glad to be in space with you all as well, and with folks in the audience here. And so Sean gave a great introduction to who we are, so I'm gonna speed this up really quickly. But just to really kind of talk more about specifically a lot of the work we're doing today is that we're still doing a lot of the same things, but we're definitely connecting it more to the political power at play within Santa Ana, but also within Orange County as well. Just because it's a beast to deal with Santa Ana Police Department, but then also another layer to deal with the district attorney, sheriffs, and so forth. And so just thinking through our analysis around different layers of power and how they operate, and all of its connection to everything from housing to anything quote unquote criminal justice related, and to how young people operate and work and what they do in schools. And so I'm not going to read off this list of things, but really that's just kind of a key element of who we are. And then I'm going to pass it over to Daisy.
Yeah, so then just going a little bit more into our mission. So like Chicanos Unidos' mission is to be informed, independent, and community-based Chicanx, Mexicanx indigenous organization that proactively and consistently identifies and challenges racism, violence, and institutional oppressions that impacts vulnerable communities. And our work is grounded on grassroots organizing and centers on community empowerment. So we strive to be self-governing, self-sustaining, and completely autonomous to better support our communities. So we also focus on outreach and retention. So we're open to supporting community members from various backgrounds to add to the significance of research and collaboration needed to make changes in various systems, such as the broken criminal justice system. And if we go to our next slide, going more into our vision, and something that Debug kind of like talked about, is our vision includes that we achieve self-determination in our community and engage our communities in promoting diversity, inclusion through community, cultural, and political empowerment. So we want to make sure that we continue to interpret and document our history, that we continue to advocate for proactive solutions, also that we maintain organizational independence. And to achieve this vision, Chicanos Unidos, we engage in community advocacy and self-empowerment, as you will see through our legal clinic. So Chicanos Unidos, our members, we engage in study sessions. We hold annual research internships, which I was a part of when I first started in 2016, to better understand the issues that impact vulnerable communities in Orange County. And as a grassroots organization and not a nonprofit, we maintain our independence and can better assist and support the community. Through our Orange County Legal Clinic, we continue to ensure that our vision is met and support community members in a way that is sustainable and also reachable to any community member.
Thanks, Daisy. And so then just kind of going forward too, we want to emphasize why our structure is so important to how we approach our work across the board, but also really how do we work in our legal clinics. And so in 2016, the organization itself went through kind of like another restructuring of some sort, compared to when it was first founded, where it was still very much rooted in kind of like the body of rules of order, where older folks had a lot more say, a lot more sway. And also we started seeing a shift in terms of just who's joining us and who are kind of coming out and doing more of the grassroots work, was a lot of young people. And during that time, a lot of young people also were a lot more interested in more of that restorative, transformative justice work as well, and just kind of this notion of sharing power, consensus decision-making process. And so we always pride ourselves in terms of really challenging the machismo of Chicano culture, and while still maintaining and knowing that Chicano culture is like a foundation for our work, a reason why we do grassroots organizing work. And part of this is that we're also committed to continuing to learn and committed to just being able to really help improve the way that we do work. And so specifically, we just want to share a couple of pictures around just how we show up for community. And so one thing to note is that we really highly emphasize that we're not a nonprofit, because what ends up happening is that grassroots organizations are doing well, and then they go for funding, and then now they have to establish themselves as 501c3, and then they also start randomly, all of a sudden you have like a director of finance, a director of programs, a CEO, executive director, and then suddenly no one's really on the ground doing the work. And so we've always been based on the fact that we do a lot of fundraising. We ask for donations from communities in order to kind of be able to do our work. And so showing up to protests, showing up to somewhat do participatory defense. We're more so dabbling into that today, in today's time. But more previously, we did a lot of advocacy work. Gabby talked about more of that participatory defense work that she's doing under the legal clinic, but with Sean earlier today at 10 o'clock already. So if you didn't catch that, you can go watch it once it gets recorded and edited and put onto the website. But really that it's all about how we show up, how we advocate, and kind of like be a voice, but not the voice. And that just means that all of us are not directly impacted by a lot of our systems. However, we know a lot of community members who are. And so we want to really kind of empower and support people to kind of like see their voice as a power to really making a change in our systems. And with that, I'm gonna pass it back to Daisy.
Thank you, Julie. So we have a statement on criminalizing our communities, which is posted in our website. And here is a summary of our statement. So basically our stand on that is that we're against criminalizing of our communities and neighborhoods. So basically when, people, or like specifically law enforcement, refers to our neighborhoods as gang infested and labeling our neighborhoods and our neighbors as gang members, affiliates, criminals, delinquents, that's not just stereotyping. That becomes problematic because it's used as evidence, just like how Debug mentioned how they've noticed a pattern where relatives are not marked down as being family members, but instead as affiliates, to just kind of like de-emphasize the humanity on those individuals. And then also when police document how we dress, how we speak, how we walk, how we look, and just basically how we socialize, that is also criminalization, because they're criminalizing non-criminal behavior, and it's also systemic oppression. So that's just unjust. We're also against the violations of basic civil rights. Our communities do not need gang injunctions, which are civil restraining orders against alleged gang members that enclose neighborhoods. We do not need our youth streamlined into the criminal justice system through systems such as the gang database, which tracks and labels gang members. And if anything, we just need the police department, and the schools to stop diverting our attention by initiating, implementing, and maintaining oppressive policies and practices so that we can spend our time building and creating solutions. And until this happens, we will continue to fight against oppression and advocating for each other within our communities, which we strive to work on this through our Orange County Legal Clinic and also at large with Chicanos Unidos. And our next slide, Julie, thanks. Okay, sorry, or you could go back to the other one. So that, okay, thank you. So basically our Orange County Legal Clinic was established in October 2018, and it was developed with the purpose of reconciling grassroots organizing with legal advocacy by establishing a grassroots community-centered approach that goes beyond representing an individual in court. So it's very client-centered. We believe that it's important in ensuring fair and just advocacy for the community that we assist, and we just try to link people to existing programs. We don't try to recreate the wheel. Our goal is to continue to share the knowledge that we acquire and the resources in the community so that our communities are connected and prepared to advocate for themselves. And like Debug's participatory defense, we also started working towards creating our legal clinic and best practices during our weekly meetings that were held at one of our Chicanos Unidos funding members' home. So Albert Castillo and and Gabby Hernandez Castillo, also Chicanos Unidos members and non-Chicanos Unidos members will collaborate at the Castillo's dinner table, and we'll talk about our best practices and protocols to best support community members with participatory defense and linkage to community services. And then going back to the next slide, you'll see here, this is flyers that we'll basically post on our social media website, just advocating our community service. And again, like Sean mentioned, our legal clinic is pro se. We do not offer any legal advice, and our work strives in helping individuals and not creating or recreating the wheel. We want to focus on linking our community members to services in the community. So we hold our clinics in parks, apartment courtyards, and private homes, just to make it accessible to the community. And then our goal is to just make this type of help less restrictive and easily accessible space for the community members. We're also careful not to reinvent social services and programs by making sure that we first research any community services that are available and programs so we could better support community members. Also, we do a great job with linking community members to attorneys who are available to represent them. And the next slide, talk about our current projects, our main projects. So here we mainly focus on gang database removal, gang injunction removal, sealing juvenile records, criminal record expungement, reentry plans, special education. And for example, when assisting clients with gang injunction removal letters, we basically explained the petition process, which was recently implemented by the Orange County District Attorney Office, by asking them questions, guiding them through drafting the letters, also attaching relevant documents. We want to make sure that it's hands-on. We provide all the support they need so that it's not an overwhelming process, because it's very important that, you know, whoever is eligible to get off a gang injunction has the resources and support to do so. Otherwise, it's like a life sentence. You're gonna be stuck in this gang injunction. You could get a violation for any reason, such as like going out to a fast food restaurant after 10 p.m. or your curfew because you get violated. Another thing that we do is, for example, when we're helping with sealing of juvenile records, we help with the application process as well as, you know, expungement process by carefully reviewing the applications. For example, the Orange County Public Defender's Office, they have a new leaf program application so that whoever wants to expunge the record, they could go ahead and fill out the application. Also, they have a court fee waiver form where we assist. We walk them through the process, going over how to, you know, request the records, and then also try to petition for that. And then from there, the Orange County Public Defender assists them. And then lastly, just again, trying to support community members with linking them to different services, such as in Orange County, we have the Orange County Youth Center. And also during the pandemic, trying to help them with any COVID-19 related resources and information, especially during evictions, so that community members could feel supported and know that we're here to help.
Yeah, and I think just kind of expanding here more too, there's also just such an important aspect of being community-centered and also client-centered, in that a lot of the times they're busy or they're unmotivated. They reach out because they're motivated, and then suddenly they kind of drop off. And our goal is never to blame, shame, or guilt them into being like, are you serious about this? But more so of what's happening? What's kind of blocking you from being able to kind of commit to such a process? Because we upfront, we tell them that it's going to be drafting letters, you're going to be in communication with us, you have to review your letter, you have to be prepared to sign your documents, and also either mail them in or drop them off. And oftentimes, even with just legal documents, requires money. And so if someone can't send something, can't go request or something of the sort, we try to help through that process as well. And then speaking more broadly, I think outside of just our gang database removal or even gang injunction removal, we've also had to do a ton of research around supporting young people who are impacted by the juvenile justice system. And we're also going to be doing even more of that because the Division of Juvenile Justice is going to be phasing out in California. And so what does that mean now for counties and local areas as well. Specifically, I just want to make note to kind of some of our successes, what we've been really able to do since 2018 and having the gay injunction, having the legal clinic. First, we worked with a 13-year-old youth from Santana who wasn't linked to mental health services, but instead was consistently being tracked into the justice system by having school police called on him, and also school police charging him with 2 different sets of felonies when he was 12 and 13. And so during that time, he would have outbursts, and people would see that as defiance and a lot of misbehavior, and would just directly let school police arrest him. And so that particularly is also another area in which we're working on, is why is it that our local Santana community has a whole department of police dedicated just to their school district, but also thinking more about like, what are the ties between local police and school police in that way. And then we also supported a 12-year-old girl get back home after just running away from life situations and home life. And part of just supporting her too is that she was very fearful of getting the law involved, and that what would happen to her or even her family because of that. And so we successfully supported her with re-entry back into her home and just helping her find safety in that way. We worked with a 30-year-old man to reduce his sentence from 100 years to 4 years. And so just being able to kind of like look through his case and being able to find the gaps, find just what's missing in order to justify why he needs a sentence reduction, because that is just, 100 years is just insane to even think that our justice system is thinking about sentencing people to that much. We also worked with a woman in her 50s who had been facing housing and employment exclusion or discrimination, for the lack of a better word, by linking her to just different services and also helping her expunge her record. That was something that was really kind of on, that would come up in her background checks, that would then disqualify her from employment or just getting to rent an apartment of some sort. And then we also work on cases that are not directly in the legal system yet, but could get into the legal system. So for example, we had a family reach out to us, and they were just saying that they found mold growing in their apartment and their landlord wasn't doing anything about it. And eventually, because we were able to pressure them to make sure that they are obviously not being scumlords in that way, the landlord eventually was able to remove the mold without any kind of like legal apparatus. And we also knew the riskiness of that if they got into any kind of like legal matters with the housing or with landlords, what that might mean for a family as well. And so because we advocate and we can pressure in a way that, you know, hey, we're going to report you to the Fair Housing Commission or something of the sort, that landlord essentially was like, okay, willing to kind of change, go in and fix things in the apartment. And then as of current today, we've been successful with, I think it's actually submitting and getting approved, I think 3 gang injunction removal petitions. And so that's been helpful for us just to kind of like know what works and what doesn't work. While we have those as success, we also have had a lot of rejections. And through the rejections, we continue to pressure the DA around, hey, give us direct feedback and guidance around why someone was denied from their removal or their petition in that way. And we consistently try to pressure them by having meetings and just being able to kind of talk through what is happening. And then more recently, we saw an uptick like right in June of a bunch of community members receiving letters from probation saying, hey, you have probation fees due, and you need to pay them as soon as possible, and also threatening that if they don't pay them, that they were going to get arrested. And then literally come July 1, all those people got letters saying, stating that their probation fees were completely cleared because of a new law. And so we learned that obviously police, like in law enforcement, like to instill fear and use that as a tactic to kind of silence community members in that way. And essentially, basically, that person, you know, our community members are just kind of like, that's BS. And then one of them particularly, we're still working on her case because she signed a document about getting her wages garnished. And so we're trying to figure out if that's going to be, if that document is going to also be kind of like obsolete given this new law, and that she can get out of wage garnishing in that way. And so we do a ton of our own research around just what we're learning. And a part of it is just being able to kind of understand that we're not the knowledge holders and that we're also doing quite a bit of research. We're fortunate to work with lawyers like Sean and other folks in order to kind of like understand the particular legality behind things, but we're very specific in saying we're not giving legal advice, that we have to check with the lawyers that we do work with in that way as well. And so overall, I would say that just kind of thinking through why we do this work. And a lot of the reasons are very similar to Debug's positions around legal services are confusing and predatory. You do one thing and then suddenly you need another thing. And so we try to make the process as clear and transparent as possible for community members. And a lot of that, once again, requires us to even understand that first. Really abolishing the system requires direct service work. And so, yes, we can all be lawyers and go into the legal system. However, sometimes lawyers are very detached from what's happening on the ground. And so our work is really to be that bridge and connecting community members to folks who can make a difference in the legal system. And then we always are, as we engage Sean and the students that he worked with and different legal clinics that we're at, our way is just that a community-centered approach to navigating the legal system is likely the best way to really liberate those in our community and being able to support at large. And so with that, that ends our presentation. The last slide is just our information, but if you want to contact me or Daisy, we can just drop our info in the chat. And with that, I'll turn it back to Sean.
Thank you. Oh, I just realized I've been unmuted this whole time. I wonder, I have the squeakiest chair. Anyways, thank you. You know, this is funny. I had a client who got one of those probation letters too, and I didn't know what it was about. And I think you may have just explained that to me. So, wow. And I see in the chat, other people from California have also seen people getting those letters. That's terrible if it was a scam. Anyways, thank you so much. I think we've seen in both these presentations, I'm trying to think how to say it. It's not that you guys have different approaches so much, but they're very different programs. And so I think what you both have in common is being driven by the community and by the need and meeting the needs of the community. And by doing that, you have sort of evolved into things that are unique to the communities you're in. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time in San Jose, but I know Santana pretty well, and they are different places. Okay, so since we do have 10 minutes left, we are able to take some questions and answer questions from the audience. So if there's anybody who wants to raise their hands or put a question in the chat, we'll be able to ask you to unmute and give you a chance to ask your questions. All right, well, I let you guys take a chance or give you a chance to think through what your questions what your questions are. I'll ask a question myself. So I'm going to open this up to both groups, and maybe we'll start with Debug because you specifically talked about a controversial or not, a confrontational maybe relationship with public defenders at the beginning. So what I'd like to hear about from everybody is like, what critique do you have of the legal system, those aspects of the legal system that's supposed to be on our side, our allies? Like, what are our allies doing wrong, or how are they part of the problem? So I think, oh, go ahead, Andrew, thanks.
No, I mean, we say allies. I mean, the only folks that really come to mind are public defenders. But like, at least in the criminal court system. But yeah, I mean, I think that part of like the participatory defense story is the realization that public defenders and the families of the loved ones are actually, they're supposed to be fighting for the same person, you know? There's definitely like, you know, the way we phrase it, because it's not to say that families that come to participatory defense meetings now still don't have hesitance from their attorneys, or you know, don't have barriers put up or something like that. But the way we kind of describe it to families is that like sometimes, you know, or not sometimes, I think that we feel that attorneys are catching up to the families in terms of this idea of that families can have an impact on the outcome of the case, you know, and sometimes, like, you know, there's definitely been attorneys when they first get a case and, you know, they're trying to be attorneys, you know, that's kind of like the narrative about Debug, whoever's supporting them. But, you know, 6 months later, 9 months later, you know, it could be a really cohesive team, you know, between the lawyer, the family, and the organizers, and really it's just the process of not like stopping that allows the attorney, you know, like once a packet gets produced, or, you know, once you know, an email gets sent about like, hey, you should send the investigator to talk to these people, you know, it kind of changes the dynamic of how the attorney interprets what the family, like what role the family can play. I don't want to take up too much space though, for the folks.
I just have one thing to add on. I think one thing that we're seeing, like in San Mateo County, that we wish our attorneys would be better at is like realizing that things that affect their clients, and you know, the like, you know, and affect their clients should be their concern. So like jail conditions, you know, DA overcharging. I don't think public defenders can just say, well, I just lawyer and I just take some cases and I get paid by the state. No, it's a much more, there's a more robust role. And I think that like a lot of the family, what we try to encourage families to do is to have that attorney be, you know, they're not the main advocate, but to be the best advocate that they can be. And so like realizing that things like jail conditions, things like medical stuff, this is the lawyer's job to figure out and to make arguments around. And it's not just these really slim legal arguments that's their job. There's a greater like responsibilities that we try to make them realize that, you know, that they should take up and help their clients. But that's one thing that we've seen with public defenders is just like a little too focused on just the case and not the things that are obviously affecting the person inside.
I'm going to ask you a little bit more pointed. So I worked for a little while as an extern in a public defender's office. And one thing I saw was the attorneys tended to see families as a whole bunch extra work that was not actually going to get their client any benefit, was one thing. And what you just described was creating a whole bunch more work that I know in my office, if you had gotten a deputy in charge, so the public defender in charge of the office, to make that everybody's job, everybody would love to do that. But it's like my client's family's organization doesn't get to tell me what to do every day. My deputy in charge tells me what to do every day. But, you know, another thing that has come up is the attorneys would know, you know, this case is where this case is going. If it goes to trial, mitigation, at some point, my job is going to be to say, it's not my client's fault. It's my parent or the client's parents' fault. It's my client's family's fault for doing such a terrible job raising their child and putting him in such a horrible environment and being so neglectful of my child or abusive of my client when he was a child. And that's why you should mitigate the sentence. And, you know, knowing that is very well where a case might end up. it's very hard to be in a relationship with those family members, knowing that's how it's going to end. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that up. Yeah, I think that we just make like we have the lawyers have their own thing with which they call like the mitigation packet, which is going to contain all that stuff. And the difference is with what we do with the social bio is just framing. We can talk about all the same like trauma, but not put it on the parents and realize, you know, there's confounding factors of addiction, poverty, and things like that that are happening in the background as well that, you know, might contribute to this person being in a group home, you know, being you know, in juvenile hall at points in their life. So that's fundamentally what we try to do with the difference between like the social bio and the mitigation packet, is to make it so like we don't have to be like, you know, you were such a bad mother and that's why this person doesn't have any responsibility for this crime. That there are ways to frame it in, you know, in positive ways around family.
I'll just add quickly that I think the hard part about that too is that a lot of people don't, in the legal system, a lot of it does not look at the structural and the material conditions of what's happening, and that's the bigger cause at hand. Whereas our current legal system is so focused on you broke this law and that's a violation of this action or this thing, and therefore we need to do this to you or do this. And I think one of the most poignant way we're seeing that right now is with all this anti-Asian hate activity, which is not super relevant to our topic right now, but there are structural things at play around anti-Asian sentiments and racism that is kind of being portrayed out on direct action. So when you see someone hit someone because they're Asian, but not also seeing the structural piece behind how that racism came about in the first place. And so there's always a linkage to history and time and structures. And I wish the legal system and lawyers, some lawyers, would understand that piece.
Also, I wanted to just add real quick that as community advocates, like kind of just what Andrew was mentioning earlier, that, you know, at the end of the day, as community advocates working with families and then their attorneys, it could end up being like a very cohesive team where we try to push the attorney to try his or her best to advocate for the, you know, his or her client. I think that that is a goal that could be attainable as long as there's good communication between, you know, the client and the attorney, and also the support group, either the family or the community grassroots organizations. I think that that's achievable, and it's just something where there has to be more communication and just a little bit more emphasis on like a client-centered approach.
Yeah, if I could add in there too, the like sometimes what we tell public defenders is that like, look, the families are going to be talking to you whether participatory defense exists or not. You know what I'm saying? Like they'll be outside of court and the questions are going to be like, why aren't you getting my loved one out? Like, why aren't you, you know, like that's going to be the framework of the questions. And when participatory defense is added into the mix, and like there's like kind of this collective shared learning of space between folks going through the same thing, those questions become, hey, why don't you file a bail motion? You know, like instead of like, so the questions become a lot more specific and informed and relevant to what the loved one's going through that the attorney can actually respond to. So like, in some ways, I'd make the argument that the workload doesn't actually change. It's just like the conversation changes. You know, it just becomes more informed and more productive in terms of trying to get that best outcome. Instead of like what the conversations that will just turn into conflict. You know, we'll just turn into like, why didn't you get them out? And then, you know, what happened when they were a kid, or, you know, like whatever that kind of explosive shit turns into, it can stay focused on what the next steps are.
Great. I wish we had more time, because I also would love to hear more from Chicanos Unidos about the role of the civil rights bar and how it fails. And why is it that every attorney in every county is supposed to be putting in some 40 hours a year of pro bono work, and yet none of that work ever seems to deal with victims of police violence or people who've gotten their houses tossed, right? It's eviction defense for the nicest clients you can find, work for veterans. You know, I myself, I feel like, I don't know, there's so many cases that just need people, and that if I worked a little bit harder, maybe I could take one more. But then I look around and I see so many attorneys who are not taking any. So I wish we had more time to really get into that. And, you know, to some degree, how you guys are filling holes that it's other jobs to fill. So it's a little bit after 2:15. This is the end of the formal conference for today. Everybody's invited to Kumo Space, especially the presenters, to sort of continue some of this conversation more informally. But tomorrow morning, we will be beginning with breakout sessions. There won't be a plenary in the morning. So we're gonna have a closing plenary instead, or 2 plenaries actually. And for those of you who don't know, I don't even know if that's Greek or Latin. Plenary just means everybody invited to the same place at the same time. But I hope everybody especially comes to the strategy session that Alex Vitale from New York is organizing. And then Senator Kamlager is in the center of all of these discussions in California right now. And I think she'll have something for everybody, no matter what state you live in. So I hope to see some of you in Kumo Space right now. Otherwise, I'll see you all in the morning. Thank you all very much for coming. Bye.